So our speaker today is Tim Vincent, and I'm kind of biased because he's my nephew, but I've always been really impressed with Tim. Has a tremendous work ethic. He parlayed an athletic scholarship at Northern Illinois University into almost a master's degree, which it took a lot of time and dedication. He's been involved as a classroom teacher and most recently involved with curriculum development in the DeKalb School District. I think Tim is probably one of the luckiest people in the world is to start this year as a new superintendent during COVID-19. So anyway, I thought it would be great to have Tim come and talk about himself a little bit in the Galena School District and what some of his goals and hopes and ambitions are here. So Tim, please.
Well, thanks for having me. On my way out of the office today, the secretaries, a lot of you know Patty Murphy and Karen Marsden, they go, well, make sure that you bring your wallet and don't swear because there's a swear jar. And I'm like, what kind of party is this? You know, I thought I was going to a lunch meeting. I don't know what's going on. So obviously I'm hometown Galenean, and it's really great to be back. I have 3 kids in the school, and they're 5th grade, 3rd grade, and 1st grade. My wife Lindsay is Jim and Sharon Rigdon's daughter. A lot of you probably know her, but so it's been a really nice homecoming to come back, and so it's everything has gone really well. You can imagine kind of the pros and cons chart that we had developed when we spent 15 years in the DeKalb Sycamore area, and to be able to come back is, you know, we formed a lot of great friendships there, and every part of the move, it just justified, you know, how great it is to be back home. So kids are adjusting well, and it's nice to be around, you know, grandparents. And I was getting advice from everyone in Sycamore and DeKalb, like, you know, strangers on the street. I would ask, what the, you know, should I do this or not? And one elderly gentleman who was, you know, he had been an acquaintance of mine the last 20 years as I've been down there. I've known him, you know, kind of off and on throughout, and you know, he said something that makes sense now. It didn't, you know, it's kind of a flippant comment then, but now it makes sense now. Is he goes, you know, I'm not as excited for you as I am for your in-laws, you know, the kids' grandparents. Like, I'm really excited for this. So we're seeing, you know, that hometown connection has been really incredible for us to have grandparents at ball games and for them to go ride 4-wheelers. It's been really great. So, so my history, so I left Galena when I was 18, and, you know, been gone for over 20 years, as a 7th and 8th grade math and science teacher, 9 years as a building principal. Barb's going to tell me if I'm doing this right. I'm going to keep going back to Barb Sloan for advice. Yes, right. So, yeah. I'm a little worried who I'm going to get heckled. Joel, or if it's going to be Janet, or where this is going to, you know, I don't know where this is going to come from. So, right. So, swear jar has been retired. That's good. I don't know that I'll have to worry about that today. I hope not. Yes. So there's 2 things. You know, Carter asked me to talk, and you know, as kind of hopes and dreams for the school year. You know, it's hard to look. My challenge so far has been to kind of, you know, deal with COVID and everything that goes along with that while keeping an eye on the future. So, so, you know, let's start with COVID first of all. It's, you know, I'm not gonna lie, it has been challenging to deal with. We've been really lucky, and the people that put a nice plan in place, and you know, the protocols haven't changed since, and so that's a testament to all the great people that have worked on that. So those have seemed to be working. At the same time, you know, we try to root all of these decisions, whether the quarantine or not, whether the remote or not, whether the offer in person or not. We really look at that as like, let's make sure that we're objective and not a subjective decision. Let's make sure we're rooting in metrics and not social media. Let's make sure that we're doing it that way. So, I'm sure you've all seen the warning list, and when I, you know, first started, I was really encouraging the other local superintendents to, land on a specific threshold or a metric that, let's all go remote if this happens, or let's all do this, some if-then kind of things that's rooted in data and metrics. And when you really start to look at the Illinois Department of Public Health metrics, what you find out is that they're not really tailored for a smaller county, right? So one of the metrics, for example, is 50 people per 100,000 new cases, right? So if you end up on one of the warning metrics, if 50 per 100,000 end up on the warning or end up as a new positive case. The problem with that is in a county of 20,000 people, that means if that 11th person, you end up being on the warning list. So the other problem with that is that it's 2 weeks old, right? So they collect the data, then they put it together, and it's published on the data that comes out today is 2 weeks old. So it's hard to kind of root it in those kind of decisions. So we started keeping track of the total number of kids quarantined due to either exposure, which is less likely that we've seen so far, or if they have any sniffle or headache or sickness or migraine or allergies, they have to be quarantined or have an alternative diagnosis. So that's what we've seen so far, and that's the real data that we look at now, is that we've got 83 kids today who have been quarantined because of that. And even as recent as last year, if you had a headache, you would wait till the headache leaves and then you show up the next day. Those kids with the headache one day are quarantined generally for 10 days. So that's been challenging. We had 82, which is right around 10% of our population that are currently quarantined due to that. So it's really ebbed and flowed. But it's really on a case-by-case basis whether we choose to stay in person or not. We had a staff meeting this morning, and I told people my thinking throughout this has evolved as well. I used to tell people that if we have a positive case or two in the school, we have to shut down the entire district. We have to, clean and contact trace and quarantine and all of that stuff. And the more that I've processed this, I've realized, it gives me chills to think about it this way, but it's the reality that we have to deal with, is that, as soon as you make the decision to go full remote, as soon as that happens, you're kidding yourself if you're not thinking that you're leaving behind the youngest kids. You're leaving, the primary school. As soon as we go remote, we will leave those kids behind educationally. And if somebody tells you that they can learn to read over a Zoom meeting, they're kidding themselves. So as soon as you make that, you leave behind your youngest kids and your other marginalized populations. So we're leaving behind our students with disabilities, our emergent bilinguals, our language learners. So I've really evolved from, even just a few months of we're going to shut down, end up with these have to shut down specific schools or grade levels. We're going to hold on as long as we can because I can't leave those kids behind. So I just wanted to kind of talk. This is like a harrowing discussion, right? We're talking about a pandemic and all this stuff, but this is our reality. So the other thing, when I look forward to, what's been going on, or the goals that Carter asked me to talk about today for the school year, as a new person walking in and trying to keep an eye on the future, the elephant in the room is, the 3 failed referendums and the facilities and all of that stuff that sort of landed on my plate. And it's a challenge, but it's a welcome challenge. So my goal right now, my personal goal as superintendent is just to look through all the past and look into what other options that we have. So, the last thing that I just want to overcome and be over with everybody that I can. So you're my first trial run at solution for the facilities in the Galena School District. Okay, let me do this. I'm going to take public school finance is really intricate and semi-boring. All right, so I'm going to try to just give you, I'm going to try to oversimplify it for you, okay? So there are such things as non-referendum options in order to improve your facilities, okay? And you've all heard of the 1% sales tax and all of that. So that gives you some avenues into doing some really positive facility work and some major facility work without having to go to referendum, okay? So this is the next thing, and the current thing that the Board of Education is exploring right now is what would it look like, or how much money would be available for specific projects if we didn't have to go to referendum, okay? And the solution there is alternative revenue bonds, all right? The key here is that they're non-referendum, and then they're leveraged against another funding source. So for us, the majority of that would be the county 1% sales tax, all right? So if we put that up, if we leverage that, we can have access to do some very positive, we can't do it all, but we can do a lot of really positive facility work in a really efficient and good way for the taxpayer. So the timing of this is really good, okay? The timing of this is, right now we have a board that, number one, knows that we have to do something, you know, and that sounds like a very low threshold for a decision, but that wasn't always the case, right? We have 7 board members right now who know that something needs to be done. And that's people who in the past, before they were on the board, that may not have always been the case. And they've seen the data, they've seen the buildings, they know that something needs to be done, okay? So there's consensus of the board. You know, it's not dissimilar as you refinancing or mortgage rates right now, in that they're really, it's a really advantageous time right now to at least explore these options. So this isn't something that's happening tomorrow, but it's worth exploring when we talk about the interest rates for 10, 15, 20-year bonds are very low. So that's something that could be an opportunity and could be a silver lining in the current involvement. The long-term facility planning. So one of the things that has been apparent to me in just a few months here is that there's not a long-term plan, right? There's not really a, what does Galena School District look like 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 30 years from now? And then using that, whatever that answer is, using that to backwards plan where we are today, okay? So the board has given me the charge to, by the spring of this year, to work with them, work with the facility groups to come up with a long-term facility plan. And the other major thing that's never been explored before is a phased approach. So I mentioned before, it can't all be done, but what would it look like to phase? So what would it look like to work with the people that know these buildings the best and to really phase these in a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 kind of thing. Now, I'm going to come back to this. So I need to put this in front of you, and then I'm going to come back to this. So you shouldn't understand this right now, all right? So, but I do need to reference it because there's some vocabulary in here, okay? The DSEB, okay, it's called the Debt Service Extension Base. You don't really need to remember that. But when I talk about DSEB, this is the annual levy, all right? This is the responsibility of the taxpayer. There's a certain amount, you can only go up to a certain ceiling that you ask a non-referendum, you ask the taxpayer for a certain amount of money. It's not as much, certainly, as you've seen in past referendums or anything like that. But when I mention DSEB, that means the annual levy. That means your taxes would go up if we talk about the DSEB, okay? The 1% sales tax I mentioned earlier, but the formula for these non-revenue bonds, you take your annual plus the 1% sales tax that you would leverage towards kind of a mortgage payment, a bond and interest payment, and then any surplus in operating funds. So that's existing funds that would be in our fund balance or our savings account, okay? And that would be the total bond and interest payment, the total interest payment. So these 3 things give us capacity not to go to referendum, but still able to explore something, okay? Very quickly, the DSEB, okay, that annual amount that you can take, the most that you can take per year is $141,000. Without going, if you go above that, you're not allowed to go above it without a referendum. So that's the first part of that equation that we talked about earlier, is that annual rate, okay? We're tax capped, which means that's the most that we can do, okay? When we talk about alternative revenue bonds. Let me go up. This is a quick graphic of what that looks like. So here's the 141,000, this straight line here. It goes up with what you're allowed to do, goes up with inflation, but this is how much, these are bonds that are already out here. Some of you, the school district has borrowed 0% interest bonds. That's the principal towards those bonds right now, okay? So in an annual taxing scenario, you would be able to tax up to this amount. And again, this is the DSIB, that annual amount that would go up, okay? So that's part one, that's that DSIB. Part two here is this is the official term, but this is the 1% sales tax. Now these numbers come in when our audit finishes in November, okay? So it's purposeful why this is blank over here, but you can see a stair step of what the 1% sales tax has done. Now again, we would be looking to leverage that towards a bond, all right? 2015, the asterisk that should be here, or should be something I insert there, that's when the 1% sales tax was actually a 0.5% sales tax, a facility tax. The last year of that was 2015. So this is the full 1% and what it's been doing. Now we do expect to see it go down 20% or so to be in the just shy of 500,000 in 2020 because of, and that's safely thinking because of the pandemic. We'd be looking, you know, at to be safe, 80 to 100,000 lower in that. Now the fund balance, this is our savings account for just 1% sales tax, for just the capital. Last year ended at 2.2 million. Okay, so that's how much is in our savings to do with our own money towards school facilities, all right? Now the third part of that, remember we had the DSEB, that annual levy, we had the 1% sales tax, and then we've got the operating fund. So this is the third part of that equation that would go towards a annual mortgage payment or a bond payment, all right? What I want you to see here is not all of this necessarily, but see what we have currently in our savings account, in our fund balance. In 2017, there was 5.8 million. 2018, there's 7.2 million in our savings. In 2019, there's almost 8.3 million in our savings, okay? We expect this to be around 9 million this year, okay? And we just presented a budget that is a conservative budget for fiscal year 21 that is another 500,000 to this fund balance. Okay, and what we've heard, or what the board has been telling me, is that the taxpayers are saying, not referendum, do what you can with your own money, and then we'll talk. Okay, so this is kind of a explanation of how much is currently in our savings account. Okay, so I told you I'd come back to this formula. This is an example. If we wanted to leverage the DSEB, that annual levy, it would be this plus around 500,000. Now you can allocate as little or as much as long as it would be in there. In the 1% sales tax, and then extra towards the operating fund. So this is your formula, or these are two examples of your formula. All right. Now, to make a long story short, okay, which you know already, interest rates are at all-time low. This is 20 years. We're over here, obviously. This is a close-up of what that looks like. Interest rates are at all-time low. So if it's worth looking into, seeing if we want to borrow towards a bond. Okay. Now, okay, here's the good part, and here's what was just through a straw poll was just decided on Tuesday night, this past Tuesday night. The board was asked to a person, went around the room, and not a formal vote or anything, but in this scenario, what are you comfortable doing? You know, conservatively speaking, what are you comfortable doing? Okay, and again, this DSEB is only that annual. You can choose the DSEB. So when we look here, you can put 0 here and not raise taxes anything towards this project, and just use 1% sales tax and operating balance. So here's the cool part, and this is what I want to be really transparent about, and this is what I want to say over and over and over again as we explore this. This is a really long process, but as I explore this over the course of several months, what the board is comfortable doing is not looking into the DSEB, is not raising taxes. They're looking into allocating from alternative revenue, the 1%, or the alternative revenue, $800,000 or thereabouts, okay? So what this means is two things. What this means is, number one, the board does not want to raise taxes towards this project. That DSEB that we talked about earlier is not an option, To a person, they went around and said, we do not want to raise the DSEB. We do not want to raise annual taxes from this. We want to use our own funds, or the funds that would be coming in. So we would be looking at what the board had circled is around $9.9 million in a capital project situation. Okay, so two things. Again, the board does not want to raise taxes through that levy, does not want to take advantage of that, and they would be looking at almost a $10 million project. Now, the other thing that needs to be discussed here in this $10 million project is what would that look like? And we have a meeting on Monday with the district architect to work through all of those options. Some people have said, aren't you putting the cart before a horse by looking at your finances before you look at the master plan? And what I've been telling people is, you're not committing to any of this, but you need to know what you're comfortable with. It's similar to buying a house, right? I'm not going to build or buy a house or pick out plans that's $1 million if I can only afford $300,000. It's that whole argument. They need to have at least an idea of how much money they're looking at for. This is what we're looking at as a partial phase one solution. And remember, this is 9.9 that would be borrowed. There's also a fund balance here that was allocated to buildings, okay, that could be added on top of that. Now, there needs to be a safety cushion. You would be silly to do 2 on top of the 9.9. None. We need to plan for that as well towards, what can we get done very efficiently with the money that we have. So that's when we are digitally decided, but this is the conversation that will be ongoing and really ramping up steam for the rest of the school year for sure. Yes, sir.
With even alternative revenue source bonds, that was an automatic levy. And in turn, if you really don't want to raise tax, the government has to take that portion of real estate that don't now.
That's the DSEP. That would be the DSEP. So it would be right if it were the if it were levy for the portion that is not what they're looking at.
When revenue is sold, the automatic increase to cover that debt service. And that be over year.
That would be a shell game, right? That would be the goal here is not to increase. So I guess we're saying the same thing, right? Yes.
Is the cash flow projection looking at to do the bond threshold of the ceiling, looking at a scheduled increase in the sales tax revenue, or is it flat?
Flat. So it's, let me see if I can get to that. Right here.
I mean, even though you're going to likely see
You're
a
saying
decline
here.
in 2020, it certainly hasn't been flat.
No, but that's the idea of the 800,000 includes, and there's no projection on this because you don't really know. However, just with inflation, if tourism stays the same, and this is likely to go up and eat towards that 800,000,
Which is going to reduce the reliance on operating
Correct.
costs.
Correct.
So
we think 800,000 is a conservative estimate that leaves some safety nets as well.
So if this is the least expensive money you're probably ever going to see, why wouldn't you borrow as much as you can for as long as you can?
Right. In here. So you're saying be down here?
Well, or go without DSEP, work your way back, work your way left.
Right here.
And go at 20 years.
Right.
And get as much as you can at this rate knowing that you made a flat expectation of your future revenue stream,
Sure.
and your debt service should get easier.
Right, because refinancing is probably not an option unless you want your interest rates to go up. You know, you could potentially, and I'm not suggesting this, but you could potentially refinance and extend bonds for a higher interest rate down the road, right? In 8 years, you could go back and borrow at a higher interest rate to capture more money. It's not that smart. You're right. The problem with that is on a 7-person school board who just paid off a 20-year loan. They just paid off a 20-year bond that in their
At what rate?
I don't know that one. It was much higher. Yes,
That's my point.
it was much higher. Absolutely, absolutely. But they have some, regardless of the interest rate, they have some issues with a 20-year because of the long term of it.
Is there a limit?
I agree with you, Dave. Like, you're never gonna. Why wouldn't you do as much as you can without raising taxes? As
With discounted dollars.
yeah,
They're cheap dollars.
right.
Is there a limit, Tim, that you can, you have to stick with 10 or 15? And
Max is 20. You can refinance, like I talked about, up to 40. You know, you can keep on going, pushing it out, but you can't go 30 initially. You know, max is 20.
But I think you're probably spot on.
But if you
Get as much as you
get as
can.
much as you can, because if your cash flow is going to go up and your fund balances are going to go up, and you want to do something, you may want to try to do the work that doesn't get done because you took.
Sure.
So.
You know, there's an election in April. No, what you're saying makes perfect financial sense. It makes 20 years scares people. 20 years scares people. That's why. And I know that it doesn't hold, and I'm admitted, Dave, it doesn't hold water. You're right. It doesn't hold water. Everything you're saying is correct. Everything you're saying is correct.
We started working on this nearly 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had done a 20-year bond when we started working on this, we'd have about 5.
Yeah, we would. We would. And they'd be culpable right now, too. So Monday, we're discussing both a 3 and a 2. The idea with the 2 is that the primary school, so there are 2 buildings that we have that are money pits, okay? The high school is a money pit with a lot of health, life, safety. The primary school is the same way. So the high school has a lot of square footage and, you know, people want to keep it. Do you know what I mean? It's just the way the majority of the board wants to still do a 2 building. There's some holdouts, but all of those questions are going to be asked of Marty on Monday, right? So it's still on the table. A 3 building is still on the table. I would tell you right now it's unlikely. And what those discussions are is, you know, we have a triangular campus that goes from, you know, McDonald's to the primary school and over to the water tower. You know, we would be putting 1,000 staff and students on one end, on the water tower end, with the green space everywhere else. So you end up with parking issues. You end up with, you know, and it's a very legitimate argument against the 2 building concepts, is that you're pushing everything here. You know, where does the playground go? People have to walk from a longer parking lot to get there. However, financially, you save in operating costs by running 2 buildings, you know, even with the extra construction. So it's up in the air. It has been vetted over and over that a 2 building concept was the preferred one. Yes, sir.
Is there a thought, and I know there was something floating around it, and I have nothing, of course, personal or professional with Marty Jackson, that architectural bid would get bid out or get a different look from someone else at the dollars spent of something that Marty would design versus something
Sure.
He was in that business.
Sure. I hadn't heard, you're talking bidding out the architecture services or having a second pair of eyes to look at the same plans?
So just to look at the same plan, if you come up with a, let's say a two-building plan, and this was, I think, generated around some bar talks. I don't know how much validity is there. They said, hey, let's look at this maybe through a different set of eyes.
Sure.
I don't know that I know Marty's done countless hours of very donated work.
Sure. Well, and architects always come in high, right? Especially for, it's just the safety. It's like, you know, telling you your project is going to cost $8,000 and you hem and haw over it, and then it comes in at $6,000 and you thank them for it, you know, versus the other way around, you'd be cussing, that kind of thing. So I haven't heard that, but I can, you know, I can ask. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that. What else?
So you mentioned phases.
Yes, sir.
How does the second phase can then take place after this is paid off 4 years down the road?
It's a good question. So well, let me start with the phased approach first. What needs to be decided in short order is the you know, how much money are we looking at, number one, and number two, are we doing a 3 or 2 building? Are we for sure doing a 3 or 2 building concept? Because the dominoes there that would fall is that master long range facility plan. You know, now it would be, so the idea on in X number of years, and I can't tell you 10 years or what this would be, but in X number of years would be to use the surplus from these accounts, okay, to pay that and then accumulate even more money in the capital funds. Does that make sense? So if this formula, I'm trying to find the formula, guys. So if this formula, the strategy is for 10 years is to try to run a surplus and take it out of here, maximize this here as much as possible. That will accumulate money that have to be spent on capital projects, you know, and that again is, that's non-referendum kind of, you know, free money kind of thing.
For debt service as well.
Correct.
That improves your ability to leverage.
It does. So you can, you know, you could have 2 alternative revenue bonds, one at this rate and then another one, you know, X number of years down the road.